Hey Smart Money Squad, it's Kai here. Do you ever feel like a superstar at work, but it seems your paycheck didn't get the memo? In today's video, I'm diving into the secrets of how you can negotiate yourself a higher salary. Trust me, you don't want to be missing this, and we're not talking pennies, but potentially thousands of extra dollars per year. So grab your notepads and a coffee and let's get started. We're talking about the art of salary negotiation. It's basically like a game of chess with your boss, but instead of capturing the king, you're trying to capture additional zeros on your paycheck. And having myself run a company over the last 10 years with over 100 people, I can definitely speak from experience, having gone through the motions a number of times with various employees at different levels. So the first thing you want to be doing is your homework, because ultimately you may have a number in mind that you want to have, but you need to do your homework to see if that is actually relevant in the market, because your number might be completely out of what the rest of the market is paying, and no employer will ever match you with such a number. So check your local job pages and see what equivalent positions that other companies are paying. If you're obviously way below that, then definitely that will justify a raise. But if you're already at the top end, you definitely need to think more deeply about the reasons why the employer should continue to raise your salary in the future. Now, you may have your reasons, but it starts by knowing your value and the value you add to the employer. Because ultimately, let's be honest, all of us are replaceable, right? If I'm leaving my company tomorrow, guess what? It might take 1 week, 2 weeks, maybe a month to replace me, but eventually I'm going to be replaced and the company will continue. Even Steve Jobs eventually was succeeded by somebody else. So don't get too high on your own supply thinking that you're irreplaceable. So know what you're worth and what you add to the company. Now, the second point is where you want to get very clear on the benefits and value that you bring to the organization. Have a list of bullet points of all the things that you actively contribute, show the amount of value that you're adding to the organization. Because if you can't clearly articulate it, how is your boss supposed to know that? Because they might look after 20, 30, 40 direct reports, and sometimes it's really hard to keep a track of it. So you need to really bring the message home, how much value you're adding, and ideally above your job description. Because most of us who are employed have some kind of job description where there are certain things that are expected of us, and for that, in exchange, we are paid a salary, right? So if you consistently go above and beyond that, then ultimately you bring additional value to the employer that should eventually be recognized and then compensated. So that's very important to get clear on what you're bringing in additional value to the employer. The third point you should keep in mind is that timing is everything. You can do the greatest job and really have all the right reasons to deserve an increase, but if the company at the moment is going through difficult times, the macroeconomic situation doesn't look particularly good, or the boss just had a bad week, right? Which can happen. We all have personal lives. Maybe had a breakup or the kid got sick, whatever it may be. You have to read the room, or in this case, your boss, to see in what kind of mood the person is in, and then gauge the right moment. And also a moment where you particularly shine. Maybe you just finished a project or delivered some excellent news. That will be a great opportunity to follow that up with a meeting with your boss to bring up your wish to have a higher salary. Not in a moment where you failed at the project, or as I said, the company is going through a hard time letting people know. That will be the wrong time. So again, it's common knowledge, but I've seen so many times when people come to me at the time where we're really going through a difficult time, or myself had so many other things on my plate, did the budgeting for next year, and I really have no time for other things. And if you come in that moment, you might actually get the wrong answer because the person is just in the wrong mindset. It's nothing to do with you, just with the timing. So be very conscious of that. Another very powerful negotiation technique is the silence treatment. Because often when we say something, we want the other person to respond. So after you made yourself heard and made your point to your boss, don't rush to fill the silence, because silence can be super powerful. Let it sink in. Let your boss think for a moment and let your boss come back with something rather than you trying to fill that awkward silence. That can be very, very powerful to have that silence sitting there, so then the other person feels obliged to come up with something. Because if you act all frantic and nervous, that already gives the leverage to your boss, because they will sit in that big chair and just look at you and say, well, you don't seem very confident in yourself, so maybe I can just wait a few months until I give you finally what you want. So be very confident yourself, your body language. And that brings me to the next point, and that's how you communicate your message. Because I've seen people in my office leaning back, crossed arms, looking at me and really expecting that it's the most normal thing that I should be increasing the salary by 20%, very cocky, very arrogant, and almost blackmailing me, basically saying, if I don't increase the salary, they'll be gone. And honestly, for a lot of bosses, myself included, that feels like blackmail, and a lot of people don't like that at all. And in many cases, it stirs up certain emotions, the ego comes out, and then the easiest thing is, well then, take the other job offer, even though actually you wanted to hold on to the employee. But such a blackmail approach is really not conducive to having some kind of negotiation. And a lot of bosses, obviously, they don't want to be put into such a situation. So be mindful of that. Be positive, be confident, don't be cocky, don't be arrogant. At the same time, don't be shy and all shaky. Be very clear, dress up nicely, have a clear message. As I said before, list your bullet points that you're confident as to why you deserve a raise, and then with a positive demeanor, convey that message to your boss. Another point I do want you to keep in mind is to not just talk salary, but also benefits. As I said, timing is everything. And right now, with the macroeconomic situation being a little bit difficult for a number of industries out there, your employer may not be in a position to necessarily be able to raise your salary. And, that can be understandable. You can't force it. But what you can do or ask for is to get other benefits, such as more days working remotely, for example, or you work only 4 days a week for the same pay. So you get an additional day off that you then can use to work on your own side hustle or spend with your family, what have you, right? So these benefits and perks can also add up, and they're much easier to give from an employer, especially when times are difficult and financially challenging, to give other benefits. And I think it's a great way to pivot rather than have a hard no for you feeling upset, the employer feeling upset. This way you can meet in the middle until things get financially better and the employer will be in a situation to raise the salary in the future. And that brings me to the next point, especially if it's your first time negotiating a higher salary, and that is to practice, practice, practice. Now you might feel a little bit uncomfortable practicing this with your significant other or with your mother or father or colleague. I understand that. But for that, you can actually use ChatGPT and do a role play, which is really amazing. Now, I use my voice to chat with ChatGPT, but you can basically tell ChatGPT to pretend to be your boss and you trying to get a high salary and do a role play with me. And you will see some good questions coming from ChatGPT that pretends to be your boss. And if you're stuck with a question that you can't answer, you can actually ask ChatGPT to give you a potentially great answer for that specific situation. So try out different scenarios so you feel really confident in your discussion with your boss. So I really like that approach. The same you can do for interviews in the future, but especially for salary negotiations. I think it's an amazing way to get some reps in and get a feel of how the discussion could go. Now, of course, let's be honest. You might also have a boss who just isn't a great boss or leader at all and basically completely gives you the cold treatment, ignores you, says you don't deserve it, maybe we can think about it in a year from now, and the person doesn't even show any empathy or understanding for your situation. Now, in such situations, you have two choices. Either you can accept it and just go back to doing your job and then maybe try in a few months again. Hopefully it works out then. Or you can really understand the situation that with such a boss that you're having right now in such an organization that actually tolerates such a leadership, which honestly I think is very poor management, to be honest. Personally, I would recommend at some stage you need to make your own decision and just go out there and look for better opportunities. Most people actually increase their salaries by moving employers. Now, I'm not a big advocate of jumping every half a year to a new employer, though having said that, at the same time, statistically speaking, most people have the highest salary jumps when they change employer because you come to a completely new organization and can command a higher paycheck. So it's really up to you. I think eventually we all evolve and outgrow our current role and organization. So it's good to get new impetus and have a new employer if you want to go the career route and growing your career. If, of course, you don't want to start your own business, but instead choose to grow your career within an organization, then I think at some stage, if you have a boss like that, you need to be prepared to walk away. And I think it's totally legit. And you will see it's often at that point that an employer then starts panicking and comes back to you and gives you a counter offer. And then, of course, you have the position of leverage where you can then choose, well, either you accept it or you might ask for even higher salary, or you say, listen, you had the opportunity, I tried to speak with you, you ignored me, and now it's my time to move. Ideally, when you have the conversation, you already have a backup plan. Of course, you never want to leave a job without having a new one. At least that's my recommendation. But I think it's very important to know your worth and not be a slave to an employer who is oblivious to your performance. And finally, once you manage to score your raise, of course, don't forget to celebrate in style. You got it for a reason, and Nutella and I applaud you from the sidelines. All right, champs, before you go out to negotiate your next salary raise, check out this video over here. Stay healthy, get wealthy, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.